This is the Investor Connect podcast program. This is Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of the show, in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, private equity, family offices, and many other investor groups for startups and growth companies. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for joining us. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Jim Bowen, Chief Development Officer of Debut Development Group. Debut Development Group is a developer, owner, operator, and consultant for high-end hotels, resorts, restaurants, and entertainment venues with worldwide experience and credentials. They're also the exclusive franchisee in Canada for Fogo de Chāo, the renowned Brazilian restaurant brand with plans to roll out 10 Fogo locations in Canada. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So where are you calling from today?
I'm in Toronto. This is our head office.
Well, great. Well, let's start off with your background before joining Debut Development Group. What did you do before this?
I ran consultancy in Singapore for real estate developers that were developing mixed use and retail projects. I would advise on the tenant mix and often set up introductions to retailers and restaurants, which is where I guess I first realized the importance of having a strong restaurant anchor in your project.
Oh, great. So what excites you right now?
It's a different world post-COVID. Prior to COVID, we were very involved in resort development in Mexico and the Caribbean. Because we're based here in Canada, we got locked down for quite some time during the pandemic. And coming out of it, kind of decided that we really didn't want to take on the brain damage of the travel that we had been doing, and started looking for an opportunity closer to home. And the guys from Fogo de Chāo happened to come to Toronto in the middle of it all and asked us if we'd be interested in taking on the franchise. And after our first trip to Dallas, our first pandemic trip, we welcomed the idea and have been almost exclusively devoted to building Fogo here in Canada ever since.
Great. And so for our investors, what's your advice for them about investing in restaurant deals? What do you tell them to do before they write that check?
Well, restaurants are a tricky category. There are a lot of restaurants that don't make it past the first couple of years. And we were very leery about getting involved in a restaurant. Our experience prior to that had been our own restaurants inside hotels that we could control. But Fogo is different. Fogo is really an experience. It's almost like it was tailored to the Instagram generation. From the minute you enter, you are in the middle of a show, and the food is incredible, and the experience is all encompassing. It's a very different dining experience. And that's what I would advise investors to look for, something that has legs beyond just the typical dining experience. It just isn't about the plate of food anymore. We've all seen those Instagram photos and are getting a little tired of them. It's really about the experience.
And then on the other side of that table, what's your advice for people running restaurants or launching them? What do you tell them to do before they launch that restaurant?
They need to stand out from the pack. There are a lot of restaurants out there, a lot of good restaurants out there, and getting recognized is tough. This generation is pretty fickle. They want to try everything once, but getting them back a second and third time is tough. So, you really want to think through how you're going to be seen in the mix and work that relationship.
Well, let's talk about the restaurant industry today. How do you see the industry evolving?
I don't know. It's an industry that continues to evolve. It's always evolved rapidly. I think we're all sick of the Uber Eats solution to dinner. That was overdone during the pandemic, and people do want to get out now. So it is a good time. There are a lot of restaurants out there that did not make it through that very difficult time. So there are spaces available out there now, fully equipped kitchens. Landlords looking to tenant them with a new concept. So yeah, I mean, there's always opportunity in change. I don't know, or I'm along for the ride like everybody else.
Great. So what do you see as the biggest change in the restaurant today? Where do you think it's going to go?
Well, restaurants are getting larger. We're seeing that. They are getting, I mean, as I said, more entertainment focused, experiential rather than entertainment. And, it's not about hiring a band. It's about really creating an experience. The food is a huge part of that experience, but it's not all of it. It's interior design, the training of your staff. I mean, that is critical. The industry is really facing a difficult time with staffing, recruiting, and training. Luckily, Brazilians are much less likely to jump jobs. They think of their job as their career, and that's one of the things that attracted us to Fogo is they have an incredibly high percentage of staff that has stayed pretty much their whole career. But that's tough for most restaurateurs, and retaining good people is probably one of the biggest challenges.
Great. Well, let's talk about your strategy for this space. You've already mentioned that it's about it being an experience, but why do you think the Fogo de Chāo experience will succeed?
That it's an experience, it's good value, it's different. Just to give you an example, when we move into a new market, we take a survey of the steakhouses that would be our immediate competitors, and we price a ribeye, a side, and a dessert, and then we come in at around 20% less than that price. So we're offering pretty good value to a customer. Here in Canada, our biggest competitor will be a company called The Keg, which is like a popular price steakhouse. But we offer a much more, enticing experience than they do. Fogo's concept is all you can eat, but the marketing people say all you can experience. And it's, you are continually bombarded with these chefs called gauchos who cook the meat and then deliver it throughout the restaurant. And until you say no very clearly, they just continue to bring you food. So it's incredible value. People leave feeling well fed, and will tell you that they're stuffed. The interesting thing that's happening is that in all that experience of getting all these pieces of meat by the slice, you're actually eating less than typical steakhouse. The average person eats about 60% of what they would eat at a regular steakhouse. And therein lies the ability to, cut the prices and become more popular priced. But also we have a lot less wastage. In a typical steakhouse, if somebody eats 60% of the steak, it goes back to the kitchen and thrown out. We've never actually served it. They only get what they eat, what they are capable of eating. So there's incredible savings, for us as the operator.
So it's only 60%. Is that because they're bringing it out piece at a time, or is there something else that reduces the amount they eat?
Well, there is something they call the market table that is like a salad bar on steroids, and that's where you start. And even though you know that you've got to leave room for the meat that's about to come, it's very hard to help yourself. Everything just looks so appealing. So people tend to eat a little bit more than they would like to at the market table, and then the meat starts coming around. So there are other things that contribute than eating a little bit less than they think they're going to.
Well, I understand Fogo de Chāo are very profitable restaurants, just like the Cheesecake Factory and others. They're at the top end of the scale. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, they are neck and neck with Cheesecake on revenue per location. Across roughly 70 locations in the States, they average 10.5 million US per location. Cheesecake averages 10.6. And probably by the end of this year, Fogo will overtake Cheesecake and be the number one family dining chain in terms of revenue per location. But in terms of profitability, they far surpass Cheesecake and pretty much everybody else. At the restaurant level, they are at 27.5% profitability, which is really unheard of in the industry. Here in Canada, we're not going to be able to match that because we have to pay a 5% royalty off the top to Fogo. But we will be north of 20% profitability, which in our market is still incredible.
Oh, great. Well, you mentioned the challenge of standing out, and it seemed like Fogo does that very well. Aside from the experience, what else does Fogo do that really makes them competitive in the marketplace?
Well, they've evolved a lot over the last few years. I was just at one in Beverly Hills a few nights ago, and it's one of the original. And you can really see the difference. The new ones really feature the bar. There's a lot of bar-only traffic in major cities, and we're looking for that here in Toronto and Vancouver, with a separate menu with the bar. So you can sit and have Wagyu and wine, for instance, or any one of a dozen other combinations and have a fairly, light or casual kind of dining experience. That's new. The market table itself has evolved to the point where everything on the market table is gluten-free. And Fogo is actually very good at catering to different diets. They have found that, although they're primarily a meat restaurant, they need to offer vegetarian, pescatarian, vegan menus because people often go as in a group to a Fogo because it's experiential. It tends to attract office parties, birthdays, anniversaries, those kind of events. And there's typically one person in the group that, doesn't eat meat. So they want to be able to, circumvent that decision path that says, oh, well, you don't eat meat, let's go somewhere else. That person can now have an incredible seafood experience or vegan experience at Fogo, equal to what the people that eat meat are having.
Well, you talked about the challenge of standing out. It sounds like Fogo is doing a very good job with that. What are the other challenges in the restaurant space?
Cost of ingredients is a huge one. The post-COVID, the costs of raw materials has gone crazy and fluctuates, worldwide. At any one time, there are 11 or 12 types of meat on the grill that are offered, but within that, we can accommodate cost shifts. So if one particular cut of meat is high that week, we can bring in one or two other cuts of meat, or we can overstock during weeks where things are a good deal. So we have to, we really have to work with the market to mitigate those costs. Something that, other restaurants would have a tough time doing unless they were changing their menu, almost on a daily basis.
Post-pandemic, there was a very uneven supply chain. Is that leveled out now, or is that still an issue?
It's leveled out. We buy things internationally, and that's always a bit of a challenge. Fogo is actually the number one importer of Australian Wagyu in the U.S. Also the number one importer of New Zealand lamb. So obviously those things, need to be managed. Here in Canada, although we've got a great, we're going to focus on Canadian beef. So we will not be importing to the degree that the Americans are doing. But we've been looking at Brazilian chicken. There's some amazing tasting chicken coming out of Brazil right now. So we will probably do that. We'll stick with Canadian lamb, of course. We'll probably dovetail the Americans on Wagyu from Australia. So, we're looking at these things right now.
Great. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
I just want to let people know we're opening in Toronto and Vancouver next year. Toronto in June, Vancouver in September. We have a commitment as part of our exclusive development contract with Fogo to build 10 restaurants over the next 10 years. And, unlike the US, where there are 30 major cities, we have 3 or 4. So we'll be in the major cities: Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, And then we'll be kind of testing the waters and where we go from there. We can do multiple locations in the Greater Toronto area, but we're still deciding if we're going to go to Ottawa, for instance, or Halifax and some of our secondary cities. What else should I tell you? We are opening up the business to local investors. We have a program where people can invest in individual restaurants or in the chain, and there's attractive reasons for both. We're pretty much closing out Toronto and Vancouver soon. There's still a little bit of investment left, but then we'll be looking for Montreal to be our third.
Great. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
I put all my details in the contact section. Email is probably the best and the quickest way of reaching me. It's just J Bowen at Fogo de Chāo CA, but you'll mess up the spelling, so check the contact.
Great. We'll include that in the show notes. I want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Great. Thanks very much, Hal. Really appreciate this.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Paul T. Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early-stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions.